It's quite bright up here, I can see it. Better? Excellent. Evening all. Good to see you. So should I just crack on? No problem. This one's called The Martyr Painter. There's a painting of him in there, you know, in the gallery. My father. It's quite well done. The man who painted it trained in Leningrad as a young man. Over the years, he grew more Arabic in his style, but the socialist realist touch is still there. You'll be able to tell which it is, my father in there. He's the Hezbollah, in the Hezbollah fatigues. Cedar over one soldier, a tank over the other. He's grinning in the painting. The painter has turned it into the grin of a buffoon. You see, in the final months of my father's life, he entered into a state of divine rampage. If he was Malayan, one would call it amok. But where the typical amok runs around aimlessly, my father's many years in the military allowed him to manifest his fury in a way that lent his every action total purpose. There's something about being in a tank that brings out that spirit in a man. What once had been cars, homes, lampposts, places of historical, personal, or even religious meaning, reducing the mind to mere targets and obstacles. Some obstacles are such that by their very solidity they become targets. They present a challenge to the throbbing power of the tank, a challenge no true man could back away from. For it's one thing to be challenged directly, quite another to have one's woman challenged right before one's eyes. To a tank commander, his tank is his beloved. That a wall or a church, or in my father's case, a cedar tree, might, through its weightiness, suggest itself immune from the tank's heavy tread, this is not only unacceptable, it's disgraceful. It is, of course, incumbent upon the man to face down this challenge, and in doing so, demonstrate not only his own masculinity, but also the unsullied honour of his mechanical spouse. Some of the older officers, who didn't know my father but did know his story, excused his actions on a symbolic level. The cedar, while it's a symbol of Lebanon to the outside world, is, within Lebanon itself, associated with the phalangists, particularly the white cedar. That was their insignia. This cedar tree, over 2,000 years old, growing in a small village somewhere near Shabar, had grown white, according to these old comrades, due to some kind of fungus. It was good as dead anyway, they said. Probably dead already. What your father did, it wasn't so bad. He's a hero now, you see, and heroes must be excused. When my father entered the town, his tank was belching smoke. He proceeded to blast apart the only tool shed in the village, and then, leaping up to stand Peter Pan-like atop his turret, he demanded they fix his tank or die. But we cannot fix anything now, was what they probably said to him, once they'd stopped cowering. You've destroyed all our tools. My father stood for a while, arms crossed, pondering. Okay, bring us food and wine, we're hungry. A few glasses of arak, a few coffees with cardamom, a few honey buns later, and the two teens that formed my dad's tank crew were anxious to get moving. My father, teasing them, began pointing things out. I bet we can't drive through that house. Of course we can. We drive through houses all the time. I bet we can't run over that cow. You know that we can. I bet we can't shoot the top off that minaret just as the muezzin is calling the adhan. Easy. Okay. He looked round. At the center of the town was the ancient cedar. Once, in the ancient days, when the bread was first tasted in the shrines of the land, when there was no town here at all, it was said that on that spot had stood a grove sacred to Astarte, the Queen of Heaven. Over the years, the land dried up, all the trees died, and from the last tree fell a single seed from which grew this cedar. I bet we can't drive over that cedar. We drive over trees all the time. Not ones that big, we don't. One tree's the same as another. Oh, you're scared. I'm not. You are. You're scared that our tank is no match for that big old rotten bit of wood. Of course she is. Oh, yeah? You think? Yeah, I think. Yeah, I do. What do you think? I don't know. I'm not sure. A little more taunting. They were revving the engines, spinning around in the square, finding the right angle of approach. My father was sitting with his head out of the turret, laughing and yelling, "You'll never manage it! The tree's too powerful!" As they made their first charge, an old man stepped in front of them. He held out his arms. The tank stopped. "What are you doing, you stupid old man? Do you want us to make you into hummus?" "I cannot let you destroy that tree." The old man was an artist, a martyr painter. "What will you do to stop us, old man? Do you have a tank too?" The job of the martyr painter is essentially to keep alive the glamour of endless war. As generation after generation feed their young men into the meat grinder of conflict, war's sacred appeal begins to diminish. Soon it becomes banal and then sordid. So the army takes photos of each new recruit. They've poised them beside a flag, rifle in hand or slung neatly over their shoulder. Their eyes stare out to a far horizon. I knew the studio where these photos were taken. In reality, the boys were all peering at a little printout of some hardcore pornography. That steely-eyed look peering through the chaos of battle to the utopia beyond is, in truth, the look of a young man trying to work out which hole an oversized member is entering on a 2-inch square JPEG stuck on a dimly lit wall 6 feet away. These noble portraits were then held in storage until the boy was inevitably martyred. The photo was then sent out to a martyr painter, and the painter produced 2 small portraits, one for the grieving mother and one for the gallery of martyrs. The Gallery of Martyrs is not so much a gallery as a storeroom. There are far too many martyrs, so every time a new one is put on the wall, an older one is relegated to storage. The martyr painter stood silent for a while, holding out his hand to the tank. "Well, old man, are you going to move or not?" "No, I will not move." "Then we must drive over you too." My father waved the tank forward. "Wait." "What?" "Just wait," said the old man. Then, rifling through his satchel, he brought out a brush. "How about I paint you?" "Paint me?" My father grinned, perhaps the kind of cruel, disdainful grin that the martyr painter chose to interpret as buffoonish. "Yes," the painter said, grinning too now, quite maliciously. "Yes, I can paint you, in oils, no charge." My father laughed. He brought out a pistol, cocked it, and leapt from the tank. "You will paint me, old man, and you will do it for free. And yet, nevertheless, we will run over your precious cedar." He held the pistol to the painter's head. "Very well," the painter said. Sure enough, as my father sat for his painting, the martyr painter did his best to capture the worst of him. Painters, after all, have the power to fix us for all time. All of the hatred, not just of this artist, but his whole village and perhaps all my father's enemies, and all the collected hatred of the world travelled through that artist's hand and onto the canvas. In all their faces, my father laughed like an idiot. Over my father's shoulder, the artist watched the boys systematically destroying the cedar. The tank tracks ground up the wood and spat it out in chunks. As he handed my father the painting, the martyr painter laughed grimly. "You know what this is, don't you?" Dad looked at it. He recognized it instantly. He'd seen a million of them before. As clear as a Madonna and Child is to a Catholic, so was a martyr painting recognizable to my father. "You're the only man who's been painted while alive," the painter said, his sharp teeth showing now through a malicious grin. "And you know what that means? Yes, sir, with this paintbrush, I do curse thee to an instant death." My father stared at the painting. To the artist's eternal chagrin, my dad's heart filled with joy. "It is I! I'm dead! I'm dead but living, the living dead! I made a creature of the beyond." He laughed and smiled. He beamed with pride. He held the picture up above his head and waved it around, showing everyone who would look. He'd never been so proud of anything as he was of that martyr painting. "We must send it back to the Martyrs Museum immediately. I must be the only still living man to be in the museum. I must." He stopped only long enough to shake the martyr's painter's hand before he was aboard the tank and driving furiously back to base. As they roared out of town, he flung a wad of stolen cash at the painter's feet. Perhaps if the painter had told him in advance that he was cursing him, my father would have spared the cedar. Certainly he lost all interest in the tree once he realized what the painting was. He never looked back at the wreckage that he created. He never even remembered doing it, in fact. So my father became the first living martyr in the Martyrs Gallery. The artist got what he wanted too, for my father died the week after. He drove off into Syria again and was never found. The Americans drone striked a T-34 and put the footage online. It appeared to be my father's tank. He was certainly never heard from again after that. The artist's curse came true after all. Thank you.